Thanks for tuning in, guys. Today we're going to do a review of the Beeshu Incorporated Ultimate Superstick. This was manufactured for the SEGA Master System and the Nintendo Entertainment System. This particular version that we have is for the SEGA Master System. We purchased this at an online estate sale for $2, and we had originally purchased it for one of our Flippin' Ain't Easy episodes. But after we were testing it out, we found that there were some problems with this. So we ran into issues with the joystick and the buttons sticking. We then went through, did some work on everything, and were able to come out to get a good working product here. And we're going to take you through those steps in this video. What we wanted to focus on, though, was after we went through this, we found that this is actually a pretty good solution for the Master System as far as the controller goes. And so we thought we would share with you what we did to correct the issues we had on this in case you may run into similar problems, and also do a little bit of a review on this because it actually works very well, and the original Master System controllers aren't the greatest in the world, especially compared to some of the other controllers. And we wanted to just do a little bit of an overview on this and show you guys an option for the Master System if you're looking for a good working controller, and give you some reasons of why you may want to use this. Beeshu Incorporated was an American video game accessory manufacturer that started their business in New Jersey in the late 1980s. In 1990, they moved their business to Florida. Beeshu had multiple accessories, including a wired and wireless version, or remote version as they had called it, for the Beeshu Ultimate Superstick. Most of their products were accessories for Nintendo, but they also manufactured accessories for SEGA. In 1993, they filed a lawsuit against SEGA, claiming that they were SEGA's accessory manufacturer. Beeshu alleged that SEGA had used its proprietary information to work with a different manufacturer. After Beeshu supposedly discovered this, they halted production, which led to significant losses. On top of this, Beeshu was being sued for a defaulted loan, and after a judge ruled against them, they ended up filing for bankruptcy in 1995. To start, we're removing the screws from the back of the case of the joystick. To remove the ball from the joystick, we had to hold our left hand down firmly on the top of the housing of the joystick and then twist while pulling upward on the ball, and then it finally came off. We went around the outside of the bottom of the case to get any dirt or grime that was left there. We tried to clean it before this, but it wasn't easy to get in this area, so we're cleaning it now. Just like the bottom, we go around the top part as well to make sure that we clean it as well as we can while we've got it apart. When I tried to remove the circuit board, I noticed that there was a lot of tension still towards the top. I thought I got everything unhooked, and then I remembered that there was the two turbo buttons or turbo dials on the opposite side, and I had forgotten to remove the dials themselves, the little covers. The left-hand cover was able to come off, but it took a lot of force from my finger. As you can see here, as much as I was struggling with it, but I finally got it off. Then when I tried to remove the right one, it was just too tight. I was going to end up pulling it off and hurt my fingers, so I ended up getting a pair of pliers and a paper towel. And the paper towel was so that the pliers wouldn't tear up the plastic on the knob itself. And whenever I used this, I was able to remove it pretty quickly. With the plastic dials removed, we were able to separate the board from the plastic housing. Now we're cleaning the joystick to make sure that there's no dirt or grit or grime down inside to make sure that it'll move okay. At this point, I had never repaired one of these or had one apart, so I wasn't sure what to expect in regards to why the joystick wasn't working correctly, so I figured I'd go ahead and clean everything while I had it apart. Once the joystick was clean, we then moved on to the buttons. Whenever we were trying to use the buttons on the initial test, they were sticking and not coming up correctly after you would push the buttons in. So we were cleaning off the tops, and we completely removed the button from the housing and clean all around the edges to make sure that they don't get hung up any longer. So at this point, we're ready to try to figure out what's going on with this thing and why it's not working. And I messed around with it a little bit to figure out exactly how it works, and it's set up almost like a set of points. You've got 4 small springs, and at the end of each spring, they're connected to a small bent piece of metal. So whenever you move the joystick either up, down, or left or right, the plastic bottom of the joystick will press down on the spring, and that will move the little bent piece of metal to make contact with the board. The only downfall I can see on this system is you've just got it's kind of like a traditional D-pad where you only have up, down, or left or right, so you're not going to really get much of anything when you get in those corners, but that's just the way this thing was designed. What I found out when I was testing it on the table is that whenever we were initially doing the test with the video game and you try to move left or up, it wasn't working quite right. The down and the right worked okay, but up and left, for whatever reason, it just wouldn't always catch, and left wasn't working at all. So whenever I had it on the table, I was moving it in these same directions, and I wasn't getting the clicking sound that I got from the other two. And now we can get a little closer look at what I was referring to, and you can also hear the clicking sound from each spring, or the lack thereof, on the left and up. It's not quite as loud as the bottom and right. To try and fix the problem, I used a small pair of pliers that I have, and I put them underneath where the bent metal was, and I just gently squeezed in to try and bend the metal a little bit back. I think what's happened is over time, as the joystick was used, it bent the metal inward to the point that it wouldn't click back down whenever you would push down on the spring. Once we got each spring to sound about the same, then I got some really fine grit sandpaper. I think it was 1200 grit. I cut a small piece, folded it in half, and then I started going through and cleaning the contact points inside of where each little bent metal piece is touching the board. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't any oxidation or anything built up in there over time. So while we had it apart, I went ahead and cleaned it up. Now we're doing a final clean on the board with alcohol just to make sure that we get any of the dust that may be there from using the sandpaper to clean up the points. Now that we've got everything fixed and cleaned, we're just going to do our final assembly, and then we can get ready to test this thing out. So now we're doing our test, and we're testing the up, down, left, and right positions. They're all working fine. All of our buttons are firing as they should, and the knobs are adjusted so that they can either speed up the fire or slow down when you're holding the button down. Everything is working just as it should. So our thoughts on this controller is good ones. There's a couple pros to this. It's, you know, by today's standards, it may not be as good as modern controllers, but at the time, if you look at what the SEGA Master System was offering for their joystick and their handheld controller, I actually like this better for a couple reasons. One, you see the cord here. This is a 9-foot cord, and especially on today's TVs, if you want to hook this up, you can give yourself 9 foot of distance between you and the TV. Now, back then TVs were smaller, of course. However, it does come in handy, and it allows it to be more versatile. Also, there's left and right hand buttons, so depending on if you're left or right handed, this comes in very handy. Or if not necessarily you're left or right handed, if just the way you're sitting you choose to use one or the other, you've got that option. There's the equivalent to turbo buttons here, but instead of a turbo button, it's a dial. So depending on how rapidly you want these buttons to fire, if instead of having to press them multiple times, you can just hold the button down and select your speed here, and it'll fire at that rate. I think that's a pretty good option. The buttons are pretty responsive. Originally, whenever we were using it, they were sticking, and we ended up taking this apart, obviously, and cleaning the buttons themselves on the inside, and that helped out a lot. The joystick itself, when I had originally used it, you know, it's kind of clickety-clackety, and I wasn't for sure how to react to it. But once I started using it, it is pretty responsive. And again, when we compare it to what SEGA was offering at the time, I personally prefer this. I think this is more responsive than what they had, and it feels natural to use it as well whenever you're holding it. You can set it on a surface. There's also suction cups on the bottom. So if you've got this on a table, or as we have it here on this surface, it sticks pretty well, and it's not going to go anywhere. I mean, you can slide it around, but it's tight. So it's very good if you're using it. It's not going to go anywhere. Even if you were just using it with one hand, it's not going to move. I would say, you know, we paid $2 for this. I had to do a little bit of work on it. I don't know what the typical price is. The ideal of this for us is to buy it and resell it on eBay and see if we can make a profit on it. I don't think we got much to lose at $2. My estimate would be this is probably a $15 to $20 controller. I haven't seen any other ones for the Master System on eBay currently. I've seen some other ones for the Nintendo. I think the Sega one is a little bit more rare, but any way you look at it, my guess would be this is a $15 to $20 item. If maybe, you know, maybe $10 more or less, whichever way you look at it. But I would recommend this for anyone that wants a good working controller for the Master System, and they don't want to deal with, they just don't want to use the original joystick that came with the Master System, or they don't want to deal with the original handheld ones. There's, again, long cord, buttons work well, the joystick works good, it'll mount firmly to a surface, and you've got these rapid fire buttons here, or turbo switches, however you want to look at it, dials, that work very well also. So I think this is a very good option, and I would recommend this for anyone looking for that.